Yes, we are live. Welcome, everyone. Peace and love. And I'm your host, Queen Tamara. Thank you for joining us tonight. And tonight we have a very special guest, and we're going to be talking about environmental justice and why it matters to everyone. And we've had guests talk about different aspects of environmental justice on the show and environmental hazards today. I mean, before, but today we're going to talk about it a little bit, a different topic, if you will. And our environment includes the air, water, and the land we live on. All of this includes the natural world and the flora and the fauna, which also includes our environment. So, unfortunately, there has been a lot of pollution and hazards that have had a negative impact on our environment, compromising our health and the health of the planet, which is all connected. And so many people think environmental hazards don't include them, but the air, the water, the soil, and all of it is connected regardless of where you live. So today we're going to explore this topic with our special guest, and her name is Ms. Maria Payan of the Sussex Health and Environmental Network. So, Ms. Maria, can you share a little bit about yourself with the listening audience?
Sure. How do we start here? So, I am executive director, as you said, of Sussex Health and Environmental Network.
Mhm.
We do our work on the Lower Eastern Shore here, part in Sussex County, Delaware, in the state of Delaware. The other part on the Lower Eastern Shore, which is
Mhm.
Chesapeake Bay, and
Mhm.
we have a lot of because it's a rural area. We have a very high concentration of poultry. That is the industry in our area.
Okay.
Um, I got involved in this work
Mhm.
um, almost close to 20 years ago
Mhm.
because I lived in a rural area in Pennsylvania, and that's where I wanted to raise my son, and that's where I grew up. And at the time, we were in Baltimore City, and
Mhm.
thought, no, I don't want to raise him in inner city. I want him to grow up to be able to connect with the outdoors, hike,
Right.
going, and I wanted that kind of the same that I had.
Right. Right.
My husband had a business on Antique Row, which is why we lived in the city. We lived right on
Mhm.
Antique Row. So we moved out into the country, and we bought. There was a business that was going up for auction the
Mhm.
next day, and we had purchased it. It was across the street from a beautiful farm. They had cattle on pasture. Behind our house, there was a pond, and there was horses. They weren't ours; they were the neighbors too.
Mhm.
It was just like the idyllic setting to raise a family.
Absolutely.
And the property owner put the property up for sale, and the next thing you knew, they started putting up chicken house, what they call CAFOs. We're not talking about little chicken houses like old
Mhm.
McDonald.
Yes. And can you tell the audience what CAFO stands for, the acronym?
So the acronym is Concentrated Animal Feeding Operation,
Operations, right?
and AKA most people call them factory farms. So
Factory
you
farms.
have these long poultry houses. Now they go anywhere between 600 feet long. I've seen them 704
Oh.
feet long in West
Oh,
Virginia.
wow.
One house, yeah, by 60 to 66 feet wide. Each house holds anywhere approximately about 50,000 chickens,
Oh,
which
wow.
are rotated 5.5 times per year. So in each poultry house in
Mhm.
1 year, there's 250,000 birds being raised. So
Mm.
have 8 poultry houses, you're raising 2 million birds a year.
Oh, wow. That's that math is math, and that's a lot.
Now,
Yeah.
years ago, poultry houses are nothing new on the Eastern Shore here, right? Years ago, they were 400-foot houses, and they had 20,000 birds in them.
Mhm.
And it would be on a big farm, right? And you would have only one or two of them. And usually the farmer had another job outside the farm, and it was a way they could raise their children, stay at home.
Mhm.
And this is quite different what's going on now. What they have now,
Mhm.
a lot of them, they call no land farms, which means that these chicken houses go from the edge to the edge of the property.
Mhm.
Now the problem comes in, most of the zoning here is what they call ag residential zoning, which
Mhm.
means, farms and houses used to be able to be in the same community. The farms used to raise food for their own community. Now, with this model,
Right.
you can have a house and you can have 2 million birds within 100 feet of your property. And with that, you have these fans that blow out the ammonia, the feathers, the dander, the bacteria. Um, all of a sudden, your air quality is not real good. It stinks. Um, start seeing nature being impacted. Like the first things I started noticing was we're losing um, all the birds that we used to have, the frogs. My
Oh, right. Okay.
So it's like I always call it. It's like a slow death. It's not like what you see with some of the other things like fracking, where maybe all of a sudden you see somebody's water coming out black out of the sink, or they can light it on fire. It's not like that. It's slow.
Okay.
It's like a slow death, I call it, because you see that this beautiful place is just slowly declining. But when it comes to that, you also realize that when you're outside, you can't be outside sometimes because it's
Mhm.
so bad. Um,
Mhm.
you have to call the kids in. Um, we also had, along with poultry houses, they also built a cattle feedlot with underground liquid manure storage. And what that is cattle
Mm.
are brought in for the last couple weeks of their life, and they're basically fattened up. They stand in a pen all
Mhm.
together, and they literally poop through the floors. It's liquid manure underneath. And when they stir and agitate that manure, the smell. So we were across from 100,000 chickens, a cattle feedlot, and then someone wanted to put 5,000 pigs up the street.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And this is all on the same piece of land?
Two of them were on the same piece of land. The other one was up the street from it. But you have to think, when you're talking about, 100,000 birds or 500,000, 5,000 swine, this isn't like a regular family when you're talking about the waste.
Yeah, it's a big operation.
Waste of a city that is literally, being put on the land around there.
Mhm.
So it is, to put it in a very graphic way, which um, what people experience. So all of a sudden we have this idyllic life. Like I said, it was like a postcard, and then everybody was sick. It was rashes. It was respiratory problems. It was. I can remember taking Michael to the doctor at 8 years old because he had tightness of the chest. An 8-year-old. He was an athlete.
Mhm.
Um, he would get off the bus and vomit because of the smell.
Mm.
Think about this. This is
Mm.
your home. This is your, I don't care if you live
Right.
in a cottage or a mansion. This is your home, right? This is
Mhm.
your safe place. Well, all of a sudden, it wasn't that anymore. The kids couldn't play outside because you knew when the smell was that bad, this was not good for little kids to be breathing this in.
Exactly, yeah.
Um, it was bad. And then it got to the point where there was a mass mortality. When things go wrong on a, this, like I said, this is not McDonald's farm. You're not talking about a couple chickens, a pig, a cow. You're talking
Mhm.
about, hundreds of thousands of animals. They had a mass mortality in the middle of summer, and they composted the birds on site. And if, in the heat, if you can imagine birds rotting in the heat in the middle of summer,
Oh
but
my goodness.
20,000 birds. And then after this happened, Michael would get in the bathtub and I'd pull him out and he'd have palm-sized blisters all over his body. Here, I'm a mother and something's wrong. You smell outside there is something very, very wrong. There's just hundreds of flies inside and outside of your house. You're trying to find out what happened.
Mhm.
No agency wants to tell you. Um, I even like had water samples and had them in my refrigerator trying to get someone to test the samples. And it was, I mean, this is the way it is in every community that I have been in,
Mm-hmm.
where I can never say that I went to somewhere and it was a model community and this is a good model for how we should be raising food and keeping the cost down. I can't say that because every
Mm-hmm.
community that I've been in experiences the same thing to a
Mm-hmm.
less or worse degree. And
Correct. Yeah.
it's not only the problem of just the animals and the waste, it's because to raise in the way that they want to be efficient, all the infrastructure is there too. So you have processing plants, you have lagoons sometimes, depending on the species. You have, concrete tanks that, would hold the waste. You have, now we're talking about, creating waste to energy. So now they're building, it's like mini refineries, these anaerobic digesters. And it can go on and on and on. And everything is in a very small area. And we know that the land and the environment can only take so much. There's only so much waste that you
Yes.
can put on land before it becomes excessive and the land cannot absorb it. And this is a problem because this land has got to last us forever to grow food in.
Exactly.
This air, there are consequences and health effects from breathing in air that is not clean. And especially when we're
Mm-hmm.
talking about things like ammonia, things like hydrogen sulfide, VOCs, they cause cancer. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then we have the problem of they use antibiotics in the feed, and this is creating antibiotic resistance. They have MRSA now.
And the animals. Okay.
Right, right. And we are using our miracle saving drugs to, raise animals to raise cheap meat so that they can survive in these conditions. That's not a smart use of our antibiotics if they're not working now because we're
Okay.
misusing them. And the CDC, they came out with a report, I think, in 2019. And
Mm-hmm.
it was, I think, 160,000 deaths due to this.
You mean human deaths?
Yes, human,
Oh wow.
a year, right? And, we're smarter than this,
Mm-hmm.
right? We know that the first thing I ever learned about farming and animal husbandry was you never put more animals on your land than your land can
And support.
support. Exactly.
This is correct.
Right.
Yes.
So when we're putting in no land farms where the land is only the houses, what are we doing with all that waste? So we're over applying waste on fields and it's running into the waterways and we're getting, dead zones and we're seeing, the effects on, like you said in the beginning, there's an ecological balance, right?
Yes.
Not throw things out or we can't survive. We
Mm-hmm.
And this is, some of the problems we're seeing with climate change now. We're seeing species disappear. But here you also have, because of the conditions, you have disease, right? So remember
Mm-hmm.
swine flu we had years ago.
Yes, I recall.
Now we have the avian flu. Now the avian flu is crossing over into dairy.
Mm.
We have cases of humans now with the avian flu.
Mm-hmm.
They just had a case in Missouri last week, and the man was not around any farm animals.
Oh, okay. I was gonna ask, was he a farm worker or something? Okay.
Right. Yeah, we've had cases here with farm workers, but they're not, in my opinion, doing enough testing. There's only
Mm-hmm.
been a couple hundred people that have been tested.
Mm-hmm.
And now, if it's getting into the other population, that means it's mutating, right? So we're really, I mean, if something like this goes through, it'll make COVID look like, a circus.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, walk in the park. This stuff is serious,
Mm-hmm.
and it's problematic because what you find is in these communities, it's always communities that are they don't put them next to the governor's mansion. Let me put it that way. Okay. These are communities that are already overburdened with pollution.
With
And I told
pollution.
you that.
Okay.
Right. So when we talk about environmental justice, what is environmental justice? To me,
Mhm.
like, you should have a clean, safe environment where you live, where you go to church, if you go to church, where
Yes.
you raise your kids, where you, I mean, these are our communities. These are our safe places. These
Right.
are our castles. I don't care what
Exactly.
house you live in. It's our castles. And this should be a safe environment to raise a family where you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, my child, is more likely to get asthma because they're exposed to all this.
Mm.
And, I've seen, we had a couple years ago down here by one of the processing plants, huge, huge, huge contamination. And in the rural areas, most people are on well water because
Yes.
so you don't have public water. And if your well gets contaminated,
Made it. You're stuck. Yeah. And you would have to pay thousands of dollars to dig another one.
yep,
And then to try to clean the well out is also a huge expense. I used to live in a rural area when I was growing up, so I know the process of the well and the septic system.
right.
Um, you answered my second question, which was about what is environmental justice. But I wanted to ask you also a question now that that it came up about. You said one summer there was a mass mortality of the poultry. Did they ever notify the public about this, or what caused this mass mortality? Was it something viral, or um
So I know what caused it. No one ever notified the public.
okay.
And this goes to the power of the industry, right? The power because it's very well lobbied. It's a
I
political
see.
football, and it's something that is frowned on when you talk about it because there's a royal code, okay, and you don't speak against your neighbor.
Hmm.
When this happened, I mean, everybody in the community could smell it, right? I mean, you're talking in the
Yeah,
summertime.
even if it wasn't the summer, but the summer heat will make the bacteria grow from the decomposing body. So I can't imagine what that would smell like.
Hundreds of flies all over your house, on TV screens, on everywhere, where there were no windows. It was crazy. We called up the agencies that are
Hmm.
supposed to be there. We didn't have a health department there. Excuse me. But we did have a state regulatory agency.
Okay.
We called. They did not come out. Um, I had pictures of chemicals because we were downstream of it, and there was like the runoff would come down the driveway, go under the road, and settle in our backyard.
Mm,
See chemicals on top of the water floating. So I took a video of it and
mm.
I gave it to a reporter, a local reporter. But she is very connected. I told her, if you're not going to write a story, we really need help on figuring out what this is.
Mm,
The next day, the state agency knocked on my door. I asked them if they would test the water. They refused to.
mm.
Yes, they refused to. We found out that there was a power outage and the generators did not kick on. And within 10 minutes, 20,000 birds died.
Within 10 minutes
10 minutes.
because of maybe overcrowding in the facility.
The fans weren't running. Now,
Oh,
nobody
the fans to keep the air circulating for them to breathe properly.
fans do. The fans, because the animals are standing on their own waste in the houses.
Oh
Okay.
my goodness.
So if you can imagine the ammonia levels inside the houses, that's why they have fans to push that air out and bring fresh air in. So they're pushing the you know what I'm
I
saying?
see. I
In order
see.
for
Okay.
birds to, right, because otherwise they would be asphyxiated.
Mhm.
So, that's what had happened there. But like I
Mm.
said, depending on where you are, like the cases we had up here, oh my gosh, they had spray fields where they were spraying the waste from a treatment plant. And we had next door neighbors that were having miscarriages. We have multiple birth defects in a very small radius, which right there shows something's very wrong. We had
Mm-hmm.
animals having seizures. One of my friends, her son died at the age of 24 of an asthma attack.
Mm.
All kinds of problems,
Mm-hmm.
tumors all over the body. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare. And
Mm-hmm.
thankfully, and some people still don't have clean water. Some people had their water replaced, and it's still not good. They had their wells redrilled. So I don't know, I'm still trying to find a way to get people water on their tap that cannot be hooked up into public water.
Yes.
Because
Okay.
there's all kinds of problems with that. Like I said, there's developmental disability. If we, there are problems with this. There's problems with breathing bad air, drinking bad water.
Mm-hmm.
People, they don't understand how serious it is. And a lot of times,
Yes.
your water, it's not like it's going to come out a different color or smell funny. If your nitrates are bad, you're not going to know it unless you test for it.
This is true because sometimes the water is contaminated. It won't have a smell
Right.
or color to it. And but the bad air quality is a serious issue, and that is not easy to treat once the air becomes polluted. But you mentioned something too about the runoff, and I learned a few years ago when I took an environmental science class just how um, serious the impact runoff is. Nearly everything that touches the ground at some point it can end up in water supplies because the water cycle, how that works, and how things that are on the ground will, when it rains or there's water or heavy rain and some disaster like flooding or something, you're going to have another major disaster when there's a lot of contaminants on the ground. So I think when I saw you speak once before, you mentioned about there was an incident somewhere, maybe in the Eastern Shore, a CAFO, where there was some heavy rain or some water receptacle burst or something, and there was a flood, and it just, with the runoff and the manure lagoons and everything, it was a bigger health hazard. You want to talk about that briefly?
So it probably was, you might have seen, we were talking about, I was showing pictures of a couple years ago in North Carolina, Hurricane Florence,
Okay.
because North Carolina has the same kind of geology that we do here. They're along the coast, like we are here, we're along the coastline, very sandy soils, which right there is problematic that we're doing spray fields, right? Because what happens when you pour something through sand? It goes right through.
Mm-hmm.
We have a very high water table because it is a coastal area.
Okay.
Have very shallow wells in some cases, which is like the perfect, it makes it very prone to contamination because when your wells are not deep and your water table's high and you're pouring things through sand, it's getting in the aquifer. And the aquifer, it just runs. It runs. And, once it's really bad. Like here, we have two competing industries because we're along the coast. So we have basically tourism. We have all the beaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have the poultry industry, which
Mm.
are probably the two most incompatible uses, right? That you ever
Okay.
put together. But because of all the problems that we've had with, it's been an agricultural area here for a long time before it was developed. And the nitrates are high here, and we've had problems. The fishermen years ago, right? They lost, most of them lost their ability to make a living down here because of the waterways.
Mm.
So here in Sussex County, they did a report, Environmental Integrity Project, 50 Years of the Clean Water Act. Promises half kept or half broken. It was called something like that. And it went through every state. And in our state here, Sussex County, 97.5% of our rivers and streams are polluted.
Mm.
97.5%. A
in
hundred,
Sussex County. That's nearly 100%.
100% of our estuaries are polluted.
Mm.
And we have a very high number. I think it is the highest in terms of wells that are not potable, private wells.
Mhm.
Which, this is some of the long-term causes of this. But when
Mhm.
we know this, we should be smart then, right? And say, okay, let's not keep applying nitrates on top of fields that are already, you know, they're over contaminated with nitrogen, with phosphorus.
Mhm.
It's we have to be smarter. We have to be smarter. There's other ways to raise food. Years
Yes.
ago, people used to raise food for their community. And
Yes.
in my opinion, it was a better way because the
Mhm.
money stayed within the community, wasn't global and,
Stayed local, and it was smaller, and the animals had more freedom to roam. I know my grandparents actually had a farm,
right.
and they had just chickens,
Mhm.
cows at one time, but the animals were free to roam around, and everybody I grew up around at that time in my life had small farms as well, maybe like 10 chickens, 20 maybe at the max or something like that. And they were free to roam around during the day. At night they put them up in the barns. And never witnessed what you're describing until later. I would travel places, especially when you're traveling through rural areas and you see those CAFOs and you're like, oh my God, like it's so the houses. I've never been inside one. I've only seen documentaries about it, but that's not what I saw in local small farms.
No. And again, let's go back to common sense, right? So what was
Mhm.
the first things we were saying? You never have more animals than your land can
The
support.
land can support, exactly.
When everyone, and we all do better when we all do better. That's another thing I believe in. And
This is true.
right? Everyone had a cow or a couple chickens or, crops like small, you know what I'm saying? Tomatoes, this, that, the farms did. And it was for their local community.
Hmm.
And it supported the local community, it supported the farmers. You
Hmm.
have to have all this $1 million equipment, right? To monocrop and the waste. It was a natural way that the land recycles it because it wasn't too many animals that that land could support. It just made so much sense. It was local butcher shops. It was,
Hmm.
and the infrastructure for that is just about totally gone everywhere.
Hmm.
And that's
So do you think it's because the mass, well, I don't, I wonder if there is actually a mass demand for, like you said, cheap meat or whatever. Is this what fuels the CAFO industry? Because in the past, there were lots of people, but no, they ate, farmers supported their own households or their community. So what's different now that the CAFOs are being built and still, in use, knowing that, these hazards?
so the original idea
Hmm.
behind this was we were going to keep food affordable. There is a gentleman, his name is Dr. John Eichert.
Hmm.
And I just adore this man because he has seen this from both sides. So he was, um, uh, he taught economics, but dealing with agriculture, right?
Hmm.
Um, at Land Grant University. And when he first heard this idea about doing it, it sounded reasonable, right? We
Hmm.
could, we could produce food cheaper and keep the cost of food down.
Okay.
But okay, then we got into subsidizing, right, with the crops. We have
Hmm.
monocrops now. All these crops that you see, most of this is to feed the animals, not to feed people. This is
Mm.
animal feed that's being raised. So all of a sudden now we're subsidizing all of this, right? So this is our tax dollars making the system work. And what it was supposed to do, um, for farms in rural communities and the general population. Some can argue that, it's cheap food, but it's not really if it's our public dollar supporting it, right? So it's cheaper to go buy out of the grocery store than to buy something from a farmer, because what you're seeing there is being subsidized, and a farmer can't raise it. When they're raising an animal, it's not raising 100,000, and right. I mean, it's just not. So he saw this, and he saw what it was doing to the environment, to the rural communities, just destroying the economics of the rural communities. The farmers were in these contracts now that were not fair. They would have to buy the houses, the poultry houses or swine houses, depending on what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like a poultry house today is like $400,000 for one house. That farmer has to pick that up.
Yes, I see. Yes.
Okay. And then there's constantly, they keep them in debt because this way they can control them, right? That mortgage is on their farm in those cases. That's been in their family for generations.
Mm.
And then they come and they say, we need you to upgrade. You're going to have to do different fans. You're going to have to do different lighting. You're going to have to do different water lines. So they have to keep running to the bank, another $100,000, and it's this wheel they can never get off of. And they can't really speak out about it because it ends up retaliation. They'll lose their contract. Mm-hmm. They just had a really good article, an opinion piece that I read the other day, in the New York Times, and it talked about they've been trying to work on antitrust, right, and more fair rules for the farmers, so that there was not retaliation. They could make a living wage. It was they could not be retaliated against and have a fair contract.
Okay.
So they asked farmers to go on the Hill, and this is during the Obama administration. And they promised them they would protect them. Nothing would happen. They would not be retaliated against. And farmers went up, and one of my friends, as a matter of fact, went up and testified. A bunch of farmers went up and testified with the promise they were going to be protected. When he came back home, there was a note on his gate that says, "You're done." And he never got another load of chickens again. His farm went into bankruptcy, and he lost it. So, this is not fair to the environment in most cases, the contract growers in most cases, the neighbors in most cases, and I would argue the taxpayers in most cases, because I think if you ask taxpayers, where would you like subsidies go to, I think a lot of taxpayers would say, I would like it going to the small farmer to raise food, in a way that is not monocropping, that is not, industrial poultry capos or swine capos, or, where a small farmer can make a living.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. Well, you did discuss some of the long-term effects of CAFOs. You mentioned the poor air quality and the contaminating the soil and the water supplies. What are some other long-term effects?
I had a conversation the other day with someone from the journalism with the University of Delaware. Mm-hmm. And I said, I think the thing that really shocked me when this happened, and I thought I was going to be able to educate people and this would change because this was not right what was going on and people didn't know or understand it. I mean, that was my mindset back then. People were getting hurt. And I think that in a lot of ways, we were raised in a certain feeling of protectedness, that there was someone out there always protecting us, right? There was departments, there was the EPA, there was, your state regulators. You had a government that was looking out for you. Yes. And you get deep into these issues like this, the shock that happens when all of a sudden people realize, oh my gosh, they're holding hands with the people that they're supposed to be, enforcing. And all of a sudden you say, oh my God, this isn't like a chicken problem or a swine problem. This is a democracy problem we got going on here,
Oh, wow.
right? It's too much power. And if you think of any industry like the fossil fuel industry, right? The tobacco industry. This is, it's a lot of PR, but it is a lot of power, and it's a lot of big lobbies, and a lot of people are kind of behind a curtain. And the other ones and we're seeing this here a lot right now, is the workers, right?
Yeah.
Because in the processing plants here, like more than 50% of the workers are either usually Haitian or Latino.
Okay.
And often it's English as a second language. And not only are they living in the communities because the infrastructure, like I said, but they're also working in the plants where these are very dangerous jobs. And often there's not training that is being done in their language when they're dealing with very dangerous chemicals, and it's if they're not getting trained in their native language, I know that they don't know about OSHA.
Yes,
I think
I
that's
would agree.
right. And we really need some education on, these are people that are providing our food. These, like I said, these are dangerous jobs for people that can read, the FDA and, and understand the material data safety sheets. But when you have folks that are dealing with chemicals like this and they're not being instructed on, like, there's just been way, 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 way too many people that are getting injured. I saw a gentleman I talked to where he was doing like sanitation work. And this was a gentleman, he was here legally, right? He came in under the IRA to work here. And he was an accountant in Haiti. He was an accountant. And he was doing some type of sanitizing work and had glove, and the chemical ran down his arm and it burnt right through his arm. But nobody told, like he said, they said, watch what he's doing. I mean,
oh wow.
This is not the way that this should be happening. So I know a lot of the workers are trying to put together what they think would help fix this, because this isn't brain surgery, right? You're asking for training in language so that you understand they want to work. They don't want to work. They want to work. But it's gotta be safe. But they're going to need help with getting their voices out there, right? Because they can't lose their job. So this is a kind of like behind the curtain, like I say. A lot of this stays behind the curtain. It doesn't get out in the general, and they need our help. They need our support.
Yes.
And one of the things I think as consumers, we have so much power that we don't even know that we have.
Are there safety regulations being enforced in these facilities? Because you mentioned that many of the workers are not getting the proper training in their own languages. So what safety precautions and regulations are in place?
So there are federal regulations.
Okay.
I think I would shock you if I told you that the labor code in Delaware has exemptions. And like when we talk anything about poultry, they, the first thing he said is, oh, they provide this many jobs and this kind of a tax base. And they like to say they're the biggest industry. I don't know if that's still true anymore. Okay. But they are exempt from the labor code, as well as
Oh.
domestic workers. Isn't that interesting?
Mm.
Who'd have thought?
Interesting.
Who'd have thought? Who would have thought? And how is that possible in 2024? Like, that is like something from the old South, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I couldn't even believe it. Someone had called me up and was asking me questions about, poultry workers, and did I know? And they said they're exempt from, and I said it can't be. And she said, and I made her show it to me in the code because I could not believe it. But that's true. They just had a big article about Virginia where they have children in there, 10, 12-year-old children doing sanitizing.
Mm. Mm.
Dangerous.
Wow.
Very dangerous.
Yes, and this has been eye-opening because I think it's very important that people know where their food comes from. Despite all the damage that has been done to the earth due to mining and CAFOs and trash landfills, etc., what can people do to mitigate the damage and help heal the planet? Like, what are some things they can do despite? I mean, is all hope lost in these kind of situations, or there's some things that can be done to help eradicate that?
No, I think a lot of times it does feel like all hope is lost. But I also am a big believer in that we can all do better.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not giving anybody off the hook with that, but I'm saying, so for example, we're not going to be able to mitigate a big operation that happened to set up shop next to our house. But what can we do?
Mm-hmm.
We can understand that when there are trucks and trucks and trucks and trucks and trucks and trucks and trucks going by, or when there is odor or certain type of activity going on, that's the time you bring your family in, right? So that you are not exposing children and the elderly. Children, firstly, they're breathing, they're just little and they breathe at a much.
Yeah, they're more vulnerable, I think.
Yes, they are. And just like the elderly are and people, that have underlying conditions. But children, that's a big one. So we have to protect them as we can that way. The other way, get involved. Like, even if it's, here's what this is my wish for the world. Honestly.
Yes.
We have to understand that we are all connected. Just like water, land, the water and the air, and so are we as human beings.
Mm-hmm.
And just because it's not in our backyard today, or we're not feeling that, we have to have enough empathy and common sense to say, okay, what can I do? I don't have to buy that product, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I know somebody's getting hurt. What else can we do? I can advocate for this, right? If there is a petition going around, get involved in your local politics, your school districts.
Mm-hmm.
There are folks that are like schools and hospitals that are growing their own food. I mean, there are things that we can advocate for as parents, as leaders.
Yes.
We're not going to change the world overnight, but I think knowledge is power.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is stay connected with the land, with the soils, because I think we've lost a lot of that. And I don't think it's healthy for us mentally, right? To be sitting behind a computer screen all day. I don't think it's healthy for kids. And I think that the more connected we are, the more we appreciate that these things are living deep, just like we are, just like the trees are, right? Mm-hmm. These are, no, they're not human beings, but they are part of our connected ecosystem and our lifeblood.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. Okay. So that you answered the next question that I had, but what's something you did say, stay connected and stay connected to the planet and get more involved. What are some ways that people can get involved, like locally or in their state, to help resolve some of these issues?
So
You tell us a little bit about what you do with the Sussex Health Network.
Environmental Network. Okay.
Mhm.
So what we are, and we are an advocacy group, right?
Mhm.
We work with communities. If there is a community, and actually we're part of the TICTAC now, which is trying to connect frontline communities
Mhm.
to um, be able to apply for grants that can help stand up community. So a lot of the work that I do is totally on the ground locally. And
Mhm.
that's in, pretty much Delaware and the Lower Eastern Shore. Um, we do not too much policy, but there are policy that I will sign on and support. I'm not a policy writer, but I am a big advocate for getting
Mhm.
involved and having your voice heard. And that's something really easy that folks can do if you pay attention and just even look on Facebook for advocacy organizations, or that they always have, when they have campaigns going out. Read,
Mhm.
take a moment, and if it's like just signing your name on, or calling a legislator, or sending an email, this matters to them. Not, and I'm going to say I've heard it from a million legislators. Not so much the canned petitions, right, where everybody signs and they just. But if you take a moment to send an
Mhm.
email and like make it personalized, they listen to that because you're a
Yeah.
constituent. So
Mhm.
that is, I think there's a lot of value in that, and people um, maybe feel like they've never done that, but that's the way our democracy is supposed to work.
Mhm.
And it takes 2 minutes. And I mean, even if a staffer answers, you can say, "Hey, this is how I feel about this, and I'm in your district." They listen, and you know, people put their finger up and see which ways the wind's blowing, right? When it comes to voting season. So yeah, you have to make your voice heard. And I always recommend to people to um, get involved, because I think a lot of times we all feel, and in a lot of times it's true, we're all too busy, right? We're raising families, we're doing,
Yes.
well, we need somebody making sure that the ship is sailing, right? I
Right. Right.
think we put a lot of trust in thinking, well, the people that are looking out for us, they would make the same decisions that I would. And, a lot of times people are out for their own interests more so than yours. So I think that's something that we need to really pay attention to, right? At least
Okay.
if you can't, run for or get involved in, take a look in public notices. Just take keep an eye and talk to people. Talk
Mhm.
about what's going on in the community, what their concerns are. Go to farmers markets, support the
Mhm.
people in your local community.
I like that. Yeah.
That I'll tell you what, that's the biggest power we have, is the power of our purse as consumers. And
I like that.
everyone will agree with that.
Yes, the power we have is the power of the purse as consumers. I like that. I like.
It's
Well,
very
thank you so much. Also, could you share with the listener audience, I guess your website, your email, if they want to reach out to you about concerns and advocacy, maybe in their state or their local area.
sure. So if you get, all you have to do is just Google Sussex Health and Environmental Network. It's shen-network.net, and the website will come up and you will see we have those dates up there, sign up list for email updates, how you can get involved. And yes, we would love to just have everyone very, very connected and trying to push for a better future for our children, our grandchildren, just for everyone. I mean,
Yes.
it's really important. Everyone is entitled to have a safe, healthy community where they have access to food, to a clean environment. We all deserve that. That to me is
Absolutely. It's a basic human right. Yes.
exactly. I'm with you. It's a
Mhm. And
basic.
you said shin-network.net.
Yes, correct.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for
Thank
sharing
you
this
for having me.
information with
Yes,
us, because a lot of people are not aware of this. And so I know the workshop that I saw you speak on, it was so informative, and I was like, this is something I definitely got to bring, you know, highlight and bring to people's attention, because um, you know, people don't see that environmental justice is not just something that happens in isolated areas, or you know, occasional water contamination here and there, or you know, occasional poor air quality. They need to know that this is um, a systemic problem, you know, and it happens in various forms, and then where some of the source of it comes from.
Exactly. And like again, like I said, we're all connected. Like there's urban pollution and environmental justice, and there's rural. And it may be slightly different, but you know what? It affects us all in our families in the
It
same.
does. It does. And we share the same watershed, whether we're in the rural areas or um, urban or suburban. You know, we all share the same watershed, like you said. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you again, perhaps. And thank you for sharing this information. And I want to say thank you to all those who are listening. And please reach out, and please take her advice when it comes to getting involved and talking to, you know, people in your community, or doing something about making um, it safer, cleaner, and less polluted.
Yeah. And grow a garden.
Yes, grow your own food. Hashtag grow your own. That's a great idea.
Right. Exactly. All right.
Okay.
Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you. Thank you. And so we're going to end our live stream. Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.